You're listening to the American edition of the Voice of Russia. I'm Ric Young in Washington. On the line from Moscow, we have with us our Voice of Russia commentator and correspondent, Dmitry Babich. Dmitry, how are you?
Doing fine. Nice to hear from you.
A lot going on at the G20 summit, and also there's not a lot going on, as they say, at the G20 summit. But one of the most, one statement that's making headlines is that Russian President Vladimir Putin says that Secretary of State John Kerry lied to the U.S. Congress regarding how much has Al-Queda infiltrated the Syrian rebel front. What's the latest on that?
Well, of course, it doesn't look like there's going to be much progress between Russia and the United States on the Syrian issue during this G20 summit. The plane with President Obama has landed in St. Petersburg. He came from Sweden, where he preferred to spend the 2 days before the summit. But Obama's aides say that there has been no meeting between him and Putin scheduled. So we still have to wait until the evening. Maybe they will meet on the margins of the summit. But in general, of course, this situation does not produce a very good impression, because I think this was one of the last chances to avoid the violent solution to the crisis in Syria. And now, unfortunately, because of the unwillingness of the American side, even to meet Russian officials, it doesn't look like we're going to use this opportunity.
Well, the G20 summit is supposed to be a meeting of the 20 wealthiest nations, talking about their economies and finances and things like that. But President Obama will not find too much support at the G20 summit for this precision military strike that he's seeking against Syria for alleged use of by the Syrian government of chemical weapons against Syrians, because, quite frankly, there aren't many nations there that support his proposal, correct?
Well, this is certainly true, and there are many other irritants in the relations of the United States with other countries in the world that make Obama less popular. There was a special story about that in the New York Times today. For example, India, whose currency, the rupee, has fallen by 20% during the last few months, is not quite happy with the policies of the United States. We are expecting later today maybe some statements from the French President Hollande and from Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel, as you might have heard, refused to take part in the strikes against Syria until there is a mandate from the Security Council of the United Nations. So probably on the first day of the meeting, on the first day of the summit, we are mostly going to hear about economy. And here, Russia, of course, has a pretty good portfolio. We are now the 8th largest economy in the world. And by nominal value and by per capita purchasing power, we are the 6th largest economy. So Mr. Yeltsin, when he was accepted into the G8, making a G8 out of G7 in the 90s, people said that this is a huge advanced payment to Russia. Now it's no longer an advanced payment because we're indeed the 8th largest economy. But of course, the whole world is now focused on Syria. So I don't expect the economic problems to get the attention that they would deserve at this summit. And in fact, it's a sad development, because Russia has done a lot of work to prepare itself for this summit. There's going to be a lot of talk about fighting corruption, about, for example, curtailing the offshore accounts, which sift a lot of capital from both the rich and poor economies. And if you look at the figures, right, Russia is approaching this summit in a pretty good shape. For example, I can tell you that the price of oil, which has dropped from $140 per barrel to just 40 between 2008 and 2010, luckily Russia never had a GDP fall during these years, although difficult as they were. And now in 2013, Russia recorded a trade surplus a trade surplus of several $1 billion. And this is a pretty good result. So we no longer need to be saying that we are important politically, but we are still not very important economically. Russia is also important economically. We have the third largest stabilization fund in the world after China and Japan. And despite the fact that Russian economy stays largely commodity-driven, it still has some influence on the world. Sadly, we don't have any economic influence on the United States, which may be a bad development for the United States too, because, I'm not sure that this intervention in Syria will be in the interest of the United States. The war in Iraq has shown that not all of the American initiative actually served the American people. One of the countries that suffered most from the Iraqi misadventure was America.
Well, you bring up a good point, because many people are pointing to, or many critics of President Obama's proposal and resolution to have a precision strike against the al-Assad government, and that is that the information given to the Bush administration following 9/11 regarding Iraq was faulty. It simply wasn't right. And that, of course, started that 10-year fiasco for the U.S. in Iraq, and it's only been the last 2 years where the troops have been drawn down and leaving Iraq, and then of course now Iraq is quite frankly a sectarian mess. So there's a lot of ways in which not only the G20 summit could deal with the Syrian situation, but it also shows me, and I think shows a lot of people, that the Middle East still dominates so many conferences where nations come together.
Well, the problem is that these conferences do not yield much in terms of protecting us from future crises, because, well, you didn't have to be a member of Bush's administration to know back in 2001 that Iraq was not connected to Al-Queda.
Right.
Al-Queda got its roots in Iraq during the war that started in 2003 when the Americans invaded it. Before Saddam Hussein, dictator as he was, bad as he was not a sympathizer of Al-Queda. He was an enemy of Al-Queda, and he kept it largely out of Iraq. So it's now that Al-Queda feels itself much stronger in Iraq. And basically, a lot of, for example, the Nezavisimaya Gazeta, one of the biggest dailies in Russia, it pointed its readers' attention today to the fact that Russia has no economic clout on the United States. We cannot send a message to the United States by economic means not to invade Syria. What we can do is just to send a few warships to the Mediterranean and to have a large military exercise, which is underway now in Russia. So most of our messages are sort of old-fashioned. And unfortunately, China is not particularly willing to use its economic power to sort of counterbalance the American, I would say, excess of initiative in the Middle East. But I hope that sooner or later reason will prevail. And after all, it's not in anyone's economic interest to have another war in the Middle East. I hope we're going to discuss it during our three-way discussion later today at about 10 o'clock in the morning, your time. And, most of the experts that we interviewed, they agree that wars have a depressing effect on the global economy. And it's really sad that some of the richest, economically richest countries in the world initiate wars nowadays.
Well, you have a point about that, and that is that war usually uses the money that should be going toward humanitarian efforts, going to military efforts, and that's for any country. It's unfortunate that so many countries around the world spend so much on defense and not enough on some of the essentials of life for most citizens of this earth. So good point taken, Dmitry. We'll, of course, talk to you later, and we'll chat with you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.